and gentlemen, Kaelin Glazier disappeared from the face of this earth on November 6th, 1996. From the beginning, investigators in this case knew that William Frank Simmons was the last person to have seen her alive. He told investigators that Kaelin had been at his place on Haven Road on the evening of November 6th, that she had left heading back towards Highway 238 down Haven Road. Kaelin's remains were found in April of 2008 in a field owned by Tom and Judy Zanich, who live at 283 Haven Road. The remains were found when Mr. Zanich was mowing a section of his field that he normally did not use. Kaelin's remains were located just 80 feet across Haven Road from the trailer that William Simmons was residing in November of 1996. In presenting this case to you, our goal will be to call witnesses in somewhat of a chronological order, although that may not turn out to be possible. The state will be calling over 40 witnesses in this case. Those witnesses include current and former police officers and investigators, persons with expertise in forensic science, and citizen witnesses. We will begin with the information that is known about Kaelin's activities on November 6th of 1996. We will proceed through the initial searches that were done for her, moving on to the discovery of her remains in 2008, the forensic examinations that were done of her remains, and concluding with details about the defendant's several statements to law enforcement officers over the years about this case. We hope to call as our first witness the mother of the victim in this case. That is Kimberly Waller. She was known as Kimberly Cruz in 1996. Ms. Waller will tell you about her family and more specifically about her daughter Kaelin. Kaelin was born on May 1st, 1981. She was the oldest child by 7 years, and she had 4 younger siblings. In 1996, the family lived at 181 Upper Applegate Road, number 9 in Rouge. We'll go ahead and show you that now on the PowerPoint to give you a sense of what the area was like. If I can do this without hitting the judge in the face. So, this is Highway 238 coming from the Jacksonville area out to Rouge. This is Upper Applegate Road, and this is the trailer park where Kaelin Glazier lived in 1996. Other people that lived there that you will hear from include Cliff Rulin, who was her boyfriend at the time, Ben Sapper. This is the elementary school. There's actually a small store located here by the trailer park. Upper Applegate Road goes out to Highway 238, and this is Haven Road. Haven Road is where the defendant's property was in 1996. It's actually right here, that area. And there are 2 different addresses for the property at 100 Johnson Road. There's also a Haven Road address, but so it may be referred to either as Johnson or Haven Road in relation to the Simmons Cheadle property. This is the Zanich property, the Zanich residence is up here, and that right around there is the area where Kaelin's remains were found. In 1996, Kaelin was a student at South Medford High School. She took the bus from her home into Medford every day. Ms. Waller will tell you that she and her family were members of the Applegate Christian Fellowship Church, which I skipped over there, but there's the church and the property. That's the Roosh store. Ms. Waller, in fact, worked part-time as a groundskeeper for the Applegate Christian Fellowship Church. She will tell you that Kaelin had a boyfriend at the time, Clifford Ruland. He lived, as I pointed out, in the same trailer court as Kimberly and Kaelin and her family. Clifford Ruland lived with his mother and with his stepfather. However, although they were boyfriend-girlfriend, Kaelin had been grounded from seeing Clifford in November of 1996. They apparently had been caught home together alone at one point, and that wasn't supposed to be happening. And in fact, the two of them were caught by an Oregon State Police trooper hanging out together on the roof of the Roosh Elementary School. So they were grounded from one another, at least as far as Kimberly Waller was concerned. November 6, 1996 was a Wednesday. Ms. Waller will tell you that Wednesday nights were an evening for worship service and Bible study at the Applegate Christian Fellowship Church. Many of the church members would turn out on these Wednesday evening services. They, in fact, could be pretty crowded. Those services started at 7 o'clock and lasted until about 8:30 or 9. There were youth groups that took place at the church on Wednesday evenings in addition to the services that took place for the adults. The youth group meetings took place in a different room, and in fact I think in a different building than the main services for the adults. Ms. Waller will tell you that Kaelin would sometimes walk to the church by herself. It was just, as you can see from the map, a fairly short distance. She will tell you that on the evening of November 6th, that Kaelin left early for church. She told her mom that she was planning on meeting up with a girlfriend. Ms. Waller believes that Kaelin left sometime around 6 o'clock p.m. on November 6th. Ms. Waller and I believe the other children went to the church at their normal time. She will tell you that the plan was, if when she got out of her services, she would normally expect to meet Kaelin in the lobby of the church, but if for some reason their schedules didn't match, then the plan was Kaelin would go home on her own, just go ahead and walk home. On November 6th, after services, Ms. Waller will tell you that Kaelin was not in the lobby, so she went home. When she got home, Kaelin was not there, which became cause for increasingly greater concern, obviously, as the evening passed. Ms. Waller will tell you that she called Mike Holstrom, who is still associated with the Applegate Christian Fellowship Church. He worked, among other things, as a security person for the church. And so Ms. Waller called him, spoke to him, asked to have him keep an eye out for Kaelin, to look for Kaelin, and he eventually informed her that he had not found Kaelin. In fact, he will tell you when he testifies that after the services were done and folks were gone for the evening, he actually got in his car and drove around a little bit looking for Kaelin and did not find her. So he reported that to Kim. Kim then called Dana Harris. Dana Harris is the mother of the boyfriend, Clifford Rulin, trying to find out whether or not Ms. Harris had any information about Kaelin's whereabouts. She didn't get any new information when she called Dana Harris that evening. And finally, about 11:30 in the evening on November 6th, she called the Jackson County Sheriff's Office and reported her daughter as being missing. The following morning, efforts continued to locate Kaelin. Kim called a phone number that she had gotten from Dana Harris, from the boyfriend's mother. She had understood that that was a number for a female friend, a girlfriend of Kaelin's. It turned out that in fact it's a number that went to the Simmons Cheadle residence. Kim Waller spoke to the defendant's uncle, who is Don Cheadle, who told her that Kaelin in fact had been seen at the residence the night before and was seen leaving the defendant's trailer, walking down the road. The law enforcement investigation into this case was complicated by questions, at least initially, as to whether or not Kaelin might have run away from home. I don't believe that Kimberly Waller ever believed that that was the case, but it was an issue that was under consideration during the early days of the investigation. Efforts were made by law enforcement to look into Kaelin's disappearance in the first few weeks after she disappeared, but it wasn't until November 27th that the case was formally assigned to a detective, although law enforcement investigation had already taken place at that point. The detective that was assigned to investigate the case was Detective Hugh Crawford, who is since retired from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. At that point, working through the county's major assault and death investigation unit, detectives began to go back over ground that had already been covered by the investigators in the case. They ramped up the investigation into Kaelin's disappearance. The case did not produce any final results. The investigation didn't produce any final results at that time, although as the case went on, the Sheriff's Office eventually named the defendant, Mr. Simmons, as a person of interest in January of 1999. The FBI became involved in this case in November of 1998 when Agent Shauna Carroll of the local FBI office became involved in the investigation. Investigators talked to a number of people in the Rouge area in the weeks and months as the investigation progressed after investigators were assigned to the case. A witness was identified, Elizabeth Keith, who was interviewed and who will testify at trial. Ms. Keith will tell you that at the time she worked at Ron's Market there in Rouge, that she personally knew Kaelin and that she recalled that Kaelin had come into the store and purchased a pack of cigarettes on the evening of November 6th. She believes that that was sometime, I think, between about 5 and 6 in the afternoon on November 6th. Other persons who were contacted by law enforcement in this case and who will testify in this trial include Dana Harris, Clifford Rulin's mother. Ms. Harris will also tell you that Clifford and Kaelin were grounded from seeing each other. She will tell you that on the night of November 6th, she worked until about 10 o'clock in the evening. Clifford had been at home with her husband, his stepfather, Clyde Harris, and they were both home when Ms. Harris came back from work about 10 o'clock. Mr. Harris then left for work, and Mrs. Harris and Clifford Rulon were home the rest of the evening. Mrs. Harris and her husband had discussed the fact that Clifford was not supposed to be seeing Kaelin, and when Ms. Harris got back from work that evening, she assumed, based on what she heard, that Clifford, in fact, had not left the house that evening, and that was information that was originally provided to law enforcement. However, she will tell you that that was information that she received, but looking back on it, she doesn't know that because she wasn't there. Clyde Harris, the husband, the stepfather of Clifford Rulon, was not in fact spoken to until August of 2009. So we're talking about well after Kaelin's disappearance. His recollection of the evening in question, looking back from then to 1996, is that Cliff did in fact walk the dog that evening. He allowed him to go out to do that. However, he recalls having second thoughts about that, thinking that Clifford may be using that as an excuse to go visit Kaelin. His recollection is that he looked outside his residence, and again, they are right there, very close, as you can see, to the residence of the Glaziers. He recalls looking outside his residence and seeing Clifford and Kaelin together in the entryway to the elementary school. He said it was getting dark, but it was still light enough to see. He says that he yelled at Clifford to come back in the house, and that Clifford did so and remained home the entire evening. Clifford Rulon will testify, and he will testify that he did not see Kaelin at the church, at the school that evening. He believes his stepfather is just confusing that with some other incident. He will tell you that in fact he did take the dog for a walk that evening, but he did not see Kaelin at the elementary school. He says he was in fact thinking about going down to meet with Kaelin, but he finally determined that he did not have the time to do that because his stepfather was kind of making sure that he didn't get away with anything by visiting Kaelin when he wasn't supposed to. He will tell you that Kaelin in fact had called, and he'd spoken to her earlier in the day. She had said that she was going to William Simmons' trailer on Haven Road and wondered if Cliff could in fact go and meet her there. He will tell you that he told her that he thought he probably would not be able to do that because he was grounded. So he does say that he did take the dog for a walk but did not see Kaelin that night. He will tell you that early the next morning, and he will tell you that his stepmom was asking, or his mom was asking him about Kaelin that night. The call came in from Kim's mom. The next morning, he went to the defendant's trailer and spoke to him, and also to his uncle, Don Cheadle, about the fact that Kaelin was missing. They discussed the fact that Kaelin had been at William Simmons' residence, his trailer, the night before, and William Simmons said that Kaelin left, and the last he saw of her, she was heading down the road back towards the highway. Apparently this was not the first time that Kaelin had skipped church, which is what she did, skipped services, and gone to the defendant's trailer to hang out. The defendant had made a number of statements to investigators regarding this case. He in fact confirmed that Kaelin had been to his trailer on the night of the 6th. He said that she arrived about 6:30 to 6:45 in the evening. And I should maybe explain the situation a little bit there. You can see it better in a later diagram. In fact, let's just go ahead if I can. jump to the next diagram. So this is just a close-up map of the area. Again, Highway 238 and Haven Road splits here. This is Haven that continues. This is a private driveway that goes out in this direction. Again, the Simmons-Cheadle property, the location where Kaelin's remains were found. So the structures on the Simmons-Cheadle property include right here the defendant's trailer. It's a very small camper-type trailer that was right there by Haven Road. The main trailer where the defendant's mother, Barbara Simmons, and his grandfather were living at the time. And his uncle, Don Cheadle, lived in a small cab-over camper like you would put on the back of a pickup truck that was set up behind the main trailer. And then there was like a barn area out in back. So the defendant had told investigators that Kaelin arrived about 6:30 to 6:45. He said that he was watching a rental movie. The movie was called Heat. That was the name of the movie. He gave an extensive interview to Agent Shauna Carroll in June of 2002. He said that his mother arrived home from work about 7:30, and that he, William, and Kaelin stuck their heads out of the trailer to say hi to her. He's talking about the small camp trailer that he lived in. He said that shortly thereafter a friend, Ben Sapper, arrived in his car. Defendant said that he and Kaelin were in his trailer when Sapper arrived, that they heard him pull up. They went outside to talk to him right there along the road. They met him at the fence along Haven Road, talked to him there. The defendant said that Ben Sapper did not come inside the residence. He stayed maybe 10 or 15 minutes. He left about 7:50 or so, and that Kaelin left between 8 o'clock and 8:15. Defendant said that when Kaelin left, he brought his VCR that he'd been watching the movie on and that rental movie, the Heat movie, into the main trailer and watched the movie with his grandfather, who, as I said, has since passed away. Although defendant's statements to law enforcement were consistent in that he says that Kaelin was at the trailer and that she left on foot walking down Haven Road towards Highway 238, they have changed over time from his initial statement that he saw her walking down the road to later statements in which he said he heard her walking down the road. The court will take judicial notice in this case of the fact that sunset on November 6th occurred at 4:59 p.m. and that twilight ended at 5:28 p.m. and that it was a moonless night. Ben Sapper was also contacted by law enforcement and will testify at this trial. He confirmed that he in fact had been at the defendant's trailer that night. He confirmed that he talked to the defendant and to Kaelin by the fence, and he said he left in his car after talking to them for a short time. He was not interviewed until December 20th of 1996, so we're talking, what, 6+ weeks after the day that Kaelin disappeared. And he did not recall the time that he was there in any of his interviews with law enforcement. But he did confirm he was there only for a few minutes, that they were just chatting about stuff. And when he left, Kaelin did not ask for a ride down to the church. So there were 4 residents living on the property, the Simmons-Cheadle property in 1996. Talked about that, the fact that it has 2 different addresses, 100 Johnson Road and 154 Haven is the other address associated with the defendant's residence. The people that lived there were the defendant, his mother, Barbara Simmons, the grandfather who's passed away, William Cheadle, and then Don Cheadle, as I said, who was in that pickup shell camper behind the main trailer. Don Cheadle was interviewed. He said he worked that day for a neighbor. Billy Joe Hunter is the person that he worked for. He said that he didn't drive, so Hunter would pick him up, drop him off after work. He said, and he'll tell you, that Hunter had a feedlot, and also he had some acreage. And Don Cheadle remembers that Billy Joe Hunter dropped him off after work that evening on November 6th. He said that he ate dinner and then spent the rest of the night in his trailer. Barbara Simmons has given several statements to investigators over the years. Times that she said she got home from work range from 6:30 to as late as 8 p.m. In one statement, she said that the defendant told her that Kaelin was in the trailer with him. In others, she said that she actually saw Kaelin. In one statement, she said she did not see Ben Sapper that night and did not see any cars coming or going from the residence. In another statement, she said that Sapper's car arrived after she got home. In her most recent statement to police, she said that she saw Kaelin leave and waved at her and yelled at her as she left. Although when confronted about the fact that she never said anything like that before, she recanted or at least backed off of that statement. The state will introduce a video rental receipt which shows that Barbara Simmons was at the Party Shop Video on November 6th of 1996 and actually was renewing the rental of that movie Heat that had originally been rented, that she had originally rented the day before on November 5th. Those movies were due the following day, so apparently she was in the store on the 6th of November and renewed the rental of that movie. The rental records from the Party Shop Video, which is no longer in business, but we have Kaelin Town, who was the part owner and manager of the store at the time, to tell you that the receipt shows that Barbara Simmons was in the Party Shop Video and rented that movie at 5:37 p.m. The Party Shop Video was at 2080 West Main Street in Medford at the time, and that's about a 20-minute drive from there to the Simmons residence on Haven Road. As part of the original investigation into Kaelin's disappearance, neighbors in the area were contacted to see if they had seen or heard anything suspicious. On December 23rd, 1996, over 6 weeks after Kaelin's disappearance, while he was completing the neighborhood canvass is just going door to door by investigators, asking people if they know anything, if they've seen anything, if they heard anything. So on December 23rd, Detective Crawford comes across the residence of Diane Smandra at 638 Haven Road. Her residence, as you can see from this map, is here. So Diane Smandra told Detective Crawford the night of November 6th, and she drove by a white male adult who was walking down Highway 238. She said this was just before she reached the spot where Haven Road forks. works here, so she said that she was coming in this way to go home, and actually she says at the time that her way home would have been like this, and then in this driveway back to her residence. She says that somewhere here on this side of the Y, she observed a white male adult heading out towards Highway 238. She gave a description of the individual, indicated he was about 5'10", 160 pounds, wearing Levi pants and a jacket with reddish-brown bandana tied around his head and with brown, brushy hair. She said this would have been about 7:30 to 7:40 in the evening. On January 29th, 1997, about 5 weeks after his initial conversation with Diane Smandra, Detective Crawford spoke to her again. He called her because he had been out in that area doing some searches, and he had spoken to her husband, Mr. Smandra, and Mr. Smandra had advised Detective Crawford that Diane Smandra believed that she saw the person that she saw walking on Haven Road at the neighbor's place. And she said the neighbor's house that she saw this person was the residence of Laurel Rashal. That residence is right here. It's the one right below the private drive. So Detective Crawford called Laurel Rashal and he said, okay, who was this person that Diane Smandra saw? She had described the circumstances that she saw this person. The detective talked to Laurel Rashal. She said, well, the only person that could have been was Clifford Ruin. Agent Carroll showed Diane Smandra 2 colored photographs of Clifford Ruin in 1999 when she was involved in the investigation. Ms. Smandra said that absolutely Clifford Ruin was not the person that she saw on Haven Road. So those two facts aren't matching up. Carroll asked Diane Smandra to work with a police sketch artist, and in 1999 she produced a sketch of what she remembered the person that she saw in 1996 to have looked like. Agent Carroll also looked into the work records for Diane Smandra to try to determine from the work records what time she might have gotten home. The work records that Agent Carroll produced from DCS Corporation, which was a collection agency where Ms. Smandra worked in the Grants Pass area back in 1996, showed that Ms. Smandra got off work at 6:14, which would have put her on Haven Street at about 7 o'clock if she came directly home. Ms. Smandra, however, now believes that she may have clocked out at 6:14 in the evening, but that she probably stayed late and worked off the clock, which would explain why she believes that she is getting home at a later time than that, about 7:30 or 7:40. Beginning within just a few days of Kaelin's disappearance, searchers were looking for her. Searches were organized by the Applegate Christian Fellowship Church. A man from the Heidi Search Center, which is a search organization, came out to assist and help organize some searches. And Jackson County Search and Rescue was also involved. Records from those searches were turned over to the sheriff's office. At the time, Detective Eric Fox and Sue Birchfield, who's a crime analyst with the sheriff's office in Jackson County, have gone through those records to identify the names of individuals who were associated in those records with a search of the Haven Road area. And we will be calling those witnesses to testify about what they recall about the areas that they searched. But we have not identified anyone who would say that they know that they searched the area where Kaelin's remains were found in 2008. Mr. Zanich, the property owner, says he walked around on the property after Kaelin disappeared, but he does not say that he looked in the exact area where Kaelin was found. He will tell you that he did not use that section of property, in part because it was so close to the Simmons-Cheadle property. They had not been getting along. There were issues with their dogs barking a lot. And he will tell you that sometimes junk and trash would end up in that section of his property, and he just generally stayed away from it. We do have one photograph from the investigation and search that was done on the Simmons-Cheadle property that happened in December, on December 17th of 1996. That photograph is looking back towards Haven, across Haven Road, towards the Zanich property. And in that photograph, the grass appears to be about waist high, thigh to waist high. There were also some searches that were done by dogs. The state will call Frank Krall, who did several searches with his dogs. Mr. Krall employed a tracking dog on November 8th of 1996. He used a scent article that he had obtained from Kim Waller. He began his search about 100 feet from the Simmons trailer, and the dog followed a scent as far as Highway 238. Mr. Krall will tell you that a dog can follow a scent trail, but it's more difficult if a person has frequently come and gone in the same area. And he will tell you that he is not certain that his dog was necessarily following the scent from the last time that Kaelin was on Haven Road. He also did searches in the area in 1997, 1998, and 1999 with a cadaver dog, including a search that took place on the Simmons-Cheadle property, but did not locate any scent. The state will also call Janet Gunter, who worked with her dog about a month after Kaelin disappeared. She responded to the search as an individual, not as a part of any organized search. She got a scent from a shoe of Kaelin's that Kim Waller gave her, gave that scent to the dog. Janet Gunter reported that her dog followed a scent out Haven Road, so she started on Haven Road towards Jacksonville, on 238, and then up as far as Forest Creek Road. Well, and Forest Creek Road is back on Highway 238, back towards Jacksonville. She said while following a scent or a trail or following her dog up Forest Creek Road, she came to a spot where a man had a car parked, and the man was out of the car talking to an individual. She said the dog showed interest in the car. She says that the man got back in the car and drove further up Forest Creek Road. Ms. Gunther will tell you that the dog and she again proceeded up Forest Creek. They came upon the man in the car again. The dog again evidenced some interest in the car that the man was driving. She will tell you, I believe, that she now thinks that the dog was not tracking a month-old scent of Kaelin's, but was tracking that particular vehicle, and believes that Kaelin's scent was somehow associated with that particular vehicle. She said that at the time she noted the license number of the car. She gave it to someone associated with the Heidi Search Organization. When Agent Carroll attempted to contact the Heidi Search Organization, to get the license number that Janet Gunter had noted, they advised her that they didn't have any records from Ms. Gunter. She will also tell you at the time that she did this search that she was new to tracking, and the dog that she was using was also new and still in the process of being trained. There was a search done of the defendant's trailer. That was on December 17th, 1996. That was done by then criminalist Stephen Strauss of the Oregon State Police Crime Laboratory. Detective Crawford had obtained permission, consent from William Simmons to search the trailer, and did so, and the crime lab did so, since there was no question but that Kaelin had been at that trailer before that night, so they're not necessarily looking for fabric or fiber or that kind of thing. Criminalist Strauss will tell you that his main objective was to determine if there was any human blood in the trailer. He examined the trailer and found no evidence of human blood. So as I've told you, Kaelin's remains were discovered by Tom Zanich on April 8th, 2008. He was mowing that section of the field that is across from the former location of the Simmons residence. The Simmons and Cheadle family had already moved from the area. They had been gone, I think, for some time. Kaelin's remains were discovered when Mr. Zanich was out with a riding lawnmower. He was preparing the area to get the grass down because I believe the power company was coming out and they were going to do some work with a tree that was around the power line. He will tell you that he had a riding lawnmower, that he purchased that lawnmower in 2004, hadn't owned one before that time. When he mowed the area on April 8th, he noticed what turned out to be a skull. And at that point, he called the Oregon State Police, and the full recovery of the remains were then scheduled for the following day. You go to the next diagram, please. This is just another close-up of, this is actually a diagram of the area where the remains were found. Kaelin's remains were found here. This is the fork that you saw in the preceding map. This is the camp trailer that William Simmons was living in at the time. This is the gate that led into the residence. Here's the main trailer. It doesn't show the location of the uncle's camp trailer or the other barn on the property. This is the area where people went in and out of back in 1996 to get into the trailer. This is the area where the defendant said he last saw or heard Kaelin heading down Haven Road back towards the highway. This is where her remains are found. There's a fairly big tree right here, a much smaller tree next to it. This is, I believe it's a ponderosa pine. This is some sort of an oak. I believe this is another ponderosa pine. There's a fence here. In 1996, there's still a fence there. Not a great fence, but there's a fence. There's also a fence along here. This is a barn area as part of the Zanich property. And again, their residence was actually on the other side of this driveway. So this is what it looked like in 1996. And because you are going to do a jury view tomorrow, I also want to show you what it looks like in 2008 at least. It's the next slide. So, and it's going to look very similar to this when you go out there to look. Simmons Cheadles are gone. There's a new family that lives there. The gate is in the same location, but the entrance is different. The fence actually that used to be here is there's a wooden fence that at the time was on both sides of Haven Road. It was still there, or on both sides of the private drive. It was still there in 2008, but this fence is down now. But this will help orientate you to the situation when you go out there. So when you are out there, there will be a cone or cones marking the remains of Kaelin's, where Kaelin was found, and there will be, if we can go back again one slide, there will be cones showing you the four corners of where the defendant's camp trailer was located at the time. Like Mr. Zanich, when he testifies, we will tell you that he mowed his entire field, which includes this entire area here, last summer, whereas he hadn't mowed it much before. He mowed the entire thing last summer. So the grass, I don't know exactly what it looks like now, but it was mowed last summer, so it's going to be lowered. So the recovery of Kaelin's remains in 2008 were done by a team of investigators and forensic scientists. The recovery team includes Detective Tim Pike. Detective Pike is the Chief Deputy Medical Examiner for Jackson County, so he's a sheriff's detective, but he's had special training in medical examiner issues, medical examiner cases where are cases in which the cause of death is suspicious or unknown or unattended, and in those sorts of cases the deputy medical examiner will respond and may very well consult with the forensic pathologist in the case. He was Dr. James Olson. Dr. Olson is actually a medical doctor with a specialty in forensic pathology. So at the scene for the recovery were Detective Pike, who assisted in the recovery and took custody of Kaelin's remains after they were recovered. Jeff Dosey is a criminalist with the Oregon State Police Forensic Laboratory. He was out there at the scene assisting in the recovery, and he did some of the initial processing of the clothing and other items associated with Kaelin's remains. Veronica Vance of the Oregon State Police Crime Lab up in the Portland-Clackamas area is a forensic anthropologist. She was down and actually assisted in the recovery of the remains in April of 2008. She also did the first examination of Kaelin's skeletonized remains. These witnesses will tell you that this is a surface disposal. It was not a burial. Although, as you will see from the photographs that we'll introduce, there was very little left of Kaelin's remains on the surface. Very little, and after it was mowed. The witnesses will explain that this is a natural process in which the body decays and the ground, the soil, the grasses grow up around the body, so the body ultimately goes back into the earth, and Kaelin was close to being there when she was found. The remains were positively identified as belonging to Kaelin Glazier through dental x-ray comparisons. The bones were also consistent with her stature, and a ring was found with the body that was identical to one described previously to investigators by Kaelin's mother, by Kim Waller. The defense has stipulated that the remains found in this case are those of Kaelin Rose Glazier. The skeletonized remains were mostly intact. The body was positioned with the head pointing towards Haven Road. Much of the clothing had decomposed over time. What little remained, in the form of a shirt and bra, was bunched up under the upper torso. The arms were in a raised position, consistent with the body having been dragged to that location. Gray duct tape was found associated with the area where Kaelin's head would have been and where the top of her torso in fact was. Criminalist Dosey examined the duct tape in the lab, found it to be over 8 feet in length. He will tell you that his examination of the duct tape is consistent with it having been used as a gag and wrapped around the victim's head and mouth. Due to the advanced state of decomposition of the remains, determining an exact cause of death is difficult. The Deputy State Medical Examiner, Dr. Olson, signed out his report indicating that the manner of death was homicidal violence of undetermined type. In her initial examination of the remains in Portland, Dr. Vance did not make note of any injuries that may have occurred at or near the time of Kaelin's death. Injuries that occur at the time of death are called perimortem injuries, as opposed to injuries that occur, trauma that occurs to bones or remains after death. That you will be familiar with that term as postmortem. Perimortem trauma is injury or trauma that occurred at or near the time of death. So in addition to the initial examination of the remains that were done by Dr. Vance, Kaelin's remains were also examined by 2 other forensic anthropologists. Dr. Jean McLaughlin, who works at the University of Oregon. She also works with the Lane County Sheriff's Office, received Kaelin's remains in August of 2008. She cleaned the bones and examined them. Her examination concluded that there were perimortem, at or near the time of death, sharp force injuries to the interior surface of the back side of the right fourth rib. Right fourth rib is about here. Rib wraps around from front to back. She noted an injury that is on the interior surface of the rib as it's attached to the back of the body. So inside, but facing this way. She noticed that, she noted that injury, and she also noted an injury to the left foot and a possible perimortem blunt force injury to the left hand. Subsequent to Dr. McLaughlin's examination of Kaelin's remains, they returned to Dr. Vance for re-evaluation. She was asked to look at them again, or she requested to look at them again after learning about Dr. McLaughlin's examination. So on re-examination, Dr. Vance did not conclude that the trauma that was noted by Dr. McLaughlin was in fact perimortem in nature. So in an attempt to resolve that inconsistency, Kaelin's remains were sent to be examined by Dr. Stephen Sims, a nationally recognized expert in forensic anthropology, who's associated with the Mercyhurst Archaeological Institute, their Department of Applied Forensic Science. He's out in Erie, Pennsylvania. Dr. Sims examined the remains, and he concluded that the sharp force trauma noted by Dr. McLaughlin on the right fourth rib was in fact a perimortem injury. He felt that the other two defects noted by Dr. McLaughlin were not perimortem, that they were likely postmortem in nature. Dr. Sims also noticed some evidence of blunt force trauma to the left side of the skull, but cannot say for sure that that is perimortem in nature. The duct tape, along with the small baby magic lotion bottle that was found with Kaelin's remains, were sent to Bellevue, Washington for an advanced type of fingerprint analysis. The defense has agreed to stipulate that that fingerprint analysis produced no fingerprints. The duct tape and the lotion bottle were then sent to the Oregon State Police Crime Laboratory up in Clackamas for DNA testing. Those items were received in the crime lab on June 5th of 2008. The testing was done by forensic scientist Heather Feeman. Forensic scientist Feeman did DNA testing on 3 items: on the duct tape, on the backing from the duct tape, and on the Baby Magic lotion bottle. She also attempted to recover a standard for Kaelin's DNA. She did that by testing a clavicle and a cervical vertebrae, trying to get a standard for the victim's DNA. She will tell you that due to the remains being exposed to the elements for 12 years, that the lab could not pull a DNA sample from Kaelin's bones. Heather Feeman will tell you that DNA testing that is done these days is extremely sensitive. She will tell you that even a new item that you might purchase in a store is likely to have DNA that came from somebody at some point. In this case, in Kaelin's case, the lab found DNA from some of the law enforcement personnel that worked on the case, both on the duct tape and the lotion bottle. It's so easy to get your DNA on items of evidence. On the duct tape, Heather Feeman will tell you that she found a very small amount of DNA that could possibly be from one or more persons. It had only 3 out of a possible 13 alleles, locations on the DNA matrix. While Heather Feeman will tell you that she may be able to exclude people who are a source of that small amount of DNA, she can't specifically identify anyone. She tested the defendant to see if she could identify his DNA on there. He was excluded as being a source of that small amount of DNA, as were others who were associated with this case.
There are some additional witnesses and things that occurred that we think are important to know. One of those people is, who we'll be calling as a witness, is a person by the name of Harry Oakes. Harry Oakes is a nationally, perhaps even internationally known search person with dogs. And he will come and testify as to the capacity of dogs to follow directional scent, particularly his dog. He has participated in hundreds of searches, if not thousands of them, and many have included directional searches. He will explain to you how a dog can follow the direction of someone's travel. He will tell you that he was contacted very shortly after Kaelin Glazier disappeared, and that he had traveled down from the state of Washington and received articles that had Kaelin's scent on it from her mother at her mother's trailer, and that his dog did a directional search, and his dog led him down to the area on 238 near the store. and then up to where the bus stop was before you get to where Haven Road hooks into Highway 238. And at that point, inexplicably, his dog lost the scent. He will tell you that just because a person walked into the cross pavement or something like that is no reason why the dog would lose scent. And that his conclusion at the time was that at that point, Kaelin entered an automobile. Now this is on her way in the general direction towards our client's residence. Harry Oakes will give you a lot of information about how these dogs work and how things work. Even though he did not do a search directly at the residence of our client, other people did. And there are at least 2 different dogs, maybe even 3, who were asked to search, given her scent and asked to search, who left a residence where she had been out at our client's trailer and immediately followed the track down towards Highway 238, leading away from our client's residence. One of those will testify that she had a relatively inexperienced bloodhound, that bloodhound has been, client candidly admitted that she had come to his house. It's going to, I believe the evidence will show that she was there quite often, that there was a group of young people that went there and other places in that community. They had a place they called it something like the Shack, where they went, drank beer and smoked cigarettes and all kinds of things. And that this was a, actually, I think the evidence will show this was a pre-planned thing with her boyfriend, that they were going to meet up at my client's place, and that got interrupted because the boyfriend's stepfather put the kibosh on that. But it wasn't just, it's a place she commonly went, was my client's residence. The evidence will also show that my client, when Caitlin left, unhooked, because he was the only one in the family that had it, unhooked his VCR and took the tape down to his grandfather's residence, which was a close by trailer, and that they watched the remainder of that movie together. The problem with all that, part of that is that he's since dead, so he's not going to be here to testify, but there were other people that were aware of that. I'm sure that they put the police officer around that took the grandfather's statement. We may be able to show you what the grandfather's statement was. But it's kind of hard to have a dead man testify. But anyway, I think the evidence will clearly show that hooked up the VCR, grandpa and grandson sat there and watched the remainder of the movie, and my client went back to his trailer. Interesting that people, substantial amount of times later, will suddenly be able to identify the person they saw walking along the road in the middle of the night, who it was and who it wasn't. But what we believe the evidence will show is